Russell Brand, Narcissist, Part 11. We now consider various aspects of Russell Brand's behaviour by his own admission and also other things that he has done. We start with his charity work. Brand has supported the following charities: Amnesty International, Comic Relief, the David Lynch Foundation, Hillsborough Family Support Group, Minds Advisory Group, Motion Picture and Television Fund Foundation, Noreen Fraser Foundation, PETA, Small Steps Project, The Art of Elysium, the Forward Trust. He's also been known for giving away significant amount of his money to other causes. Him doing so may well be demonstrative of an individual that exhibits considerable emotional empathy for the other people. Or it's a possibility that simply undertaking these steps is part of making himself look good for the purposes of asserting control and drawing fuel. To determine which way it goes, one has to look at the evidence as a whole. But it is evident that he has been involved with various charitable organisations. He's also a political activist. He participated in 2009 in a celebrity letter to The Independent as a supporter of the Hoping Foundation to condemn Israel's assault on Gaza. In February 2009, Brand and several other entertainers wrote to The Times in defence of leaders of the Baha'i faith who were on trial in Iran at the time. In April 2009, he attended the 2009 G20 London Summit protests and spoke to the press. He was selected by the Dalai Lama to host the Buddhist leaders' 2012 youth event in Manchester. They explained that Brand was selected because he'd proved the power of spirituality to effect change in his own life. Brand stated to the BBC after the event, "I said yes because he's the living incarnation of Buddha, and I thought if you're around the Dalai Lama, that can only be good for your spiritual quest through life. He's an amazing diplomat and a incredible activist, a wonderful human being, and an inspiration to us all." He's frequently campaigned for political issues. In June 2013, he appeared in a video in support of Chelsea Manning. He was ejected from the GQ Awards on the 3rd of September 2013 after receiving the Oracle Award. In his acceptance speech, he mentioned sponsor Hugo Boss's former business making uniforms for the Gestapo. Brand said of the Nazis, "They did look fucking fantastic, let's face it," before he goose-stepped across the stage in a comical imitation of the Nazi march. Brand was eventually ejected from the event after GQ editor Dylan Jones confronted Brand with his views that the speech was very offensive. Brand replied by saying that the Nazis' treatment of the Jewish people was very offensive. He has been invited to debate by the Cambridge Union Society. He set up the True News with Russell Brand. And might it be the case that his activism and politicking is done because he cares about various causes, or is it simply driven by narcissism, politics being a honeypot for many narcissists to enable them to get to the prime aims? We now turn to a number of admissions by Russell Brand himself. Therefore, this is evidence that he has created himself of his own behaviours. This evidence appears in his various autobiographies, either My Bookie Work or My Bookie Work 2. He stated, "As I escorted Michaela, a lap dancer who slapped him after sex, through the front door, I felt very strongly that I needed to avenge the slap. I spat in her face." That would suggest an absence of emotional empathy for that physical assault, and may well be representative of a response to a threat to control. "I was allowed to sleep in her, a girl called Penny's, bed top to toe. I spun gags and yarns till she let me turn around. I painted verbal pictures and begged until she kissed me. I lied and danced and evoked the spirit of Pan till reluctantly she removed her bra. I used tears and emotional blackmail to secure the immolation of her knickers." Therefore, he freely admits that he manipulated his way into having sex with this woman. "By my 20s, I would relish the challenge of chaste maids and the search for the correct combination of words required to decode their moral resistance. The Knobstacle course, I call it." Now, of course, that doesn't mean that he's doing anything unlawful, but it does show that he would engage in manipulative behaviours to have his way with women. Next, he stated, "I'm the most obsequious creature, utterly enslaved by that need for sex." Or is it actually control and the provision of fuel? "I do whatever it wants. It's ludicrous, the level of servitude and mastery over me that it has achieved." Might that be seen as a form of blame shifting? That he says, "I can't help myself, it's sex that makes me behave this way." This girl was a sorry, fair-weather excuse for a prostitute. Then the phone rings again, and and this is the worst act of misogyny I've committed since the spitting debacle, took the phone out of her hand and threw it at the wall. What kind of man was I, treating women in this way? If this is what I'm telling you, can you imagine what's being left out? Now, some of the admissions in his books would be regarded as unpleasant, and therefore for him to hint at there is more unpleasant behaviour either is exaggeration and bullshit, which is being done for the purposes of manipulation, or it is actually the case that he has left out a lot of the bad stuff, or even worse stuff. And therefore that would also support systematic behaviours over a repeated period of time, which demonstrate an absence of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement, and a lack of accountability. He also stated, "It took maybe 2 weeks of teaching a language course before I realised my classroom was a sexy library from which I could borrow lovely women from all around the world. Italian, Brazilian, Japanese. I brought back these 2 Polish women once, and a friend said, they look like them girls in Schindler's List that put blood on their cheeks to avoid being executed. I liked them." This promiscuity, something which he is freely admitted to, is again another narcissistic indicator. It also shows objectification of these women as seeing them as books in a library from which he could choose. "I estimate that 80% of women are up for threesomes if you handle the negotiation carefully." Sense of entitlement. Leslie Douglas, the former BBC radio controller, was incredibly tolerant of my behaviour at Radio 2. If you listen to old Six Music podcasts, you will notice that all the competition winners that came into the studio while we broadcast as a prize were female. This is because there was an additional aspect to the prize which could never be explicitly stated due to the BBC's rigid policy prohibiting the misuse of the disabled lavvy. This therefore hints at further behaviours which would be seen as a lack of boundary recognition with regard to a transgression of professional behaviour in a workplace. The line between good and evil runs not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but through every human heart. He's quoting from the Gulag archipelago. Evidence from Brand's own behaviours, his own words. Again, it's not to suggest that necessarily those behaviours are criminal, but what they do show repeatedly is mistreatment of women, a sense of entitlement, a lack of emotional empathy, and a lack of accountability, which would all support the likelihood of him being a narcissist. We're going to move on to another area of Russell Brand's life and also to consider other diagnoses that have been put forward in relation to his behaviour. Join me there in part 12.